The CEO opened her door at midnight wearing nothing but a silk robe. And the man on her doorstep wasn't who she expected. What happened next would either save her empire or destroy everything she'd built. But here's the twist. He was just there to return a box. Welcome to a story about power, betrayal, and the most unlikely alliance you'll ever witness. If you want to see how a single knock on a door changed 2 lives forever, stay until the end. The rain had started around 10 o'clock that Tuesday night, turning the streets of Harwick into glossy ribbons of reflected neon and headlights. Caleb Mercer sat in his aging Ford pickup outside the Riverside Apartments, engine idling, watching water stream down the windshield in chaotic patterns that reminded him of everything else in his life. Messy, unpredictable, but somehow still moving forward. In the passenger seat sat a cardboard box, small, unremarkable, wrapped in brown shipping paper that had started to soften from the humidity. It had been sitting in his apartment for 3 days, delivered to Unit 412 instead of 412, Riverside Drive, a mistake that happened more often than the Postal Service cared to admit. Caleb had meant to deal with it sooner. But between his shifts at Morrison Construction, picking up his 7-year-old daughter Maya from school, helping with homework, making dinner, and collapsing into bed, only to do it all again, the box had kept getting pushed to tomorrow. But tonight, Mia was at her grandmother's for a sleepover. Tonight, Caleb actually had a few hours to himself. And something about that box, maybe the expensive leather corner he'd glimpsed through a tear in the wrapping, maybe the embossed gold initials, stamped into what looked like a planner, had been nagging at him. Whoever owned it probably needed it, probably missed it. Caleb wasn't the kind of man who left things unfinished. Even small things, especially small things. The small things were what kept the world from falling apart. He killed the engine, grabbed the box, and stepped out into the rain. The address he'd found online had led him here to Riverside Drive, to the wealthy side of Harwick, where the houses sat back from the street behind iron gates and manicured hedges, where the street lights were designed to look like vintage gas lamps, where everything whispered old money and new power. Number 412 was a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, all clean lines and carefully calculated angles. Warm light glowed from inside, but the curtains were drawn. A sleek black sedan sat in the circular driveway, water beating on its immaculate finish. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where a guy in work boots and a rain-soaked jacket belonged. And Caleb felt that knowledge settle into his shoulders as he walked up the flagstone path. He climbed the 3 steps to the front door, raised his hand, and knocked twice. Solid, respectful knocks, the kind that said, "I'm not selling anything. I'm not trouble. I'm just here, and then I'll be gone." For a moment, nothing. Just the sound of rain drumming on the roof overhang and the distant hiss of traffic on wet asphalt. Then the door opened fast. So fast it startled him, and Caleb found himself looking at a woman who seemed to exist in a different frequency than the rest of the world. Evelyn Hart stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe the color of midnight. Her dark hair still damp and falling just past her shoulders. No makeup, no armor. But her eyes, sharp, intelligent, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the hour, scanned him with the kind of assessment usually reserved for contract negotiations and hostile takeovers. She looked like she'd been expecting someone else, someone specific, someone dangerous. "You're not security," she said. Not a question, a statement of fact delivered with the cool precision of someone used to being right. Caleb blinked rain out of his eyes. "No, ma'am, just the guy who got your mail by mistake." He held up the box like an offering. For a split second, her expression shifted. Confusion, then recognition, then something harder to read. Her gaze dropped to the package, then back to his face, then past him to the empty driveway and the rain-soaked street beyond. She was looking for someone or checking that no one had followed him. "I'm sorry for the late hour," Caleb added, suddenly aware of how this must look. Strange man. Midnight. Her alone in a robe. "I can just leave it with you. And come in." She stepped back, opening the door wider. 2 minutes. "Ma'am, I don't need to." 2 minutes, she repeated. And there was something in her voice that made it clear this wasn't a request born from politeness. This was control. This was a woman who made decisions in microseconds and expected the world to keep up. Caleb hesitated. Every instinct told him to hand over the box and leave. He didn't belong in this world of glass houses and silk robes. He had pancakes to make in the morning, a daughter who'd be home by 8, a life that was simple and stable and his. But he also saw something in Evelyn Hart's eyes that he recognized from his own mirror on the worst days after the divorce. After the custody battle, after the nights when Maya asked why Mommy didn't want to see them anymore, he saw someone holding it together by sheer force of will. Someone who couldn't afford to show cracks because the whole structure might collapse. So he stepped inside. The interior of the house hit him immediately, not with warmth, but with precision. Everything was curated, expensive, beautiful in the way museum exhibits were beautiful. Spotless hardwood floors, minimalist furniture in shades of cream and charcoal, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than his truck, but it didn't feel lived in. It felt like a showroom, like a place designed to impress rather than comfort. Evelyn closed the door behind him with a soft click that somehow felt final. "The box," she said, gesturing toward a marble-topped console table near the entrance. Caleb set it down carefully. "Postal service mixed up the addresses. Sorry it took me a few days to get it here." Work's bin, his words died as he caught sight of the room beyond the entryway. It was an office, or had been. Now it looked like a war room in the middle of a siege. Papers covered the floor in careful arrangements that suggested organization born from chaos. A laptop sat open on a glass desk, multiple windows visible even from this distance. File folders were stacked in precarious towers. And on the coffee table, 3 phones lay in a row, all of them dark except for one that suddenly lit up with an incoming call. The name on the screen, Grant Mitchell. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She didn't move to answer it. The phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times, then went dark. 10 seconds later, it lit up again. Same name. "They won't stop," Evelyn said so quietly. Caleb almost didn't hear it. The words weren't meant for him. They were the kind of thing you say when you're alone and exhausted and the walls are the only witnesses. They just won't stop. She seemed to realize she'd spoken aloud. Her posture straightened, that mask of control sliding back into place. "Thank you for returning the planner. I apologize for the inconvenience." It was a dismissal. Polite, final, absolute. Caleb should have taken it. Should have nodded, wished her a good night, and walked back out into the rain. Should have driven home, made himself a sandwich, watched TV until he fell asleep on the couch like he did most nights Maya was away. Instead, his gaze drifted to the front windows and caught on something that made his contractor's brain itch with concern. Through the glass, visible in the glow of the porch light, the fixture itself was flickering. Not the romantic flicker of candlelight, but the irregular sputter of faulty wiring. And from this angle, Caleb could see the casing around the wire connection, loose and partially exposed. In dry weather, it was a code violation. In rain like this, it was a hazard. The kind of problem people ignored until it became a fire or an electrocution. "Your porch light's about to be a problem," he said, nodding toward the window. Evelyn followed his gaze, frowning slightly. "It's been doing that for weeks. I've been meaning to call someone. The casing's loose, wires exposed. You get any wind with this rain that could arc and short the whole exterior circuit, or worse." She stared at the flickering light, then at him, clearly running calculations he couldn't see. How much worse? Fire. Electrical burns if you touch it wrong. Property damage. The usual fun stuff. Another phone started buzzing. A different one this time. Evelyn's eyes flicked to it. Something dark crossing her expression. Frustration. Anger. Clears throat. Bone-deep weariness. "I can fix it," Caleb heard himself say. "I do this kind of work. 10 minutes tops. I've got tools in the truck." The silence that followed was weighted with assessment. Evelyn Hart looked at him, really looked, taking in the calluses on his hands, the worn canvas jacket, the mud on his boots, the honest directness in his face that probably made him the worst poker player in Harwick. "Why?" she asked simply. It was the question under all questions. Why would a stranger offer to fix her porch light at midnight in the rain? What did he want? What was the angle, the play, the hidden cost? Caleb shrugged. "Because it needs fixing. Because I can. Because leaving it broken seems wrong." Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but a hairline crack in the armor. 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if the screws are rusted. But yeah. Evelyn studied him for another moment, then gave a single decisive nod. Fine, 10 minutes. The rain had intensified to a steady downpour by the time Caleb retrieved his toolbox from the truck. He worked quickly, efficiently, the muscle memory of 15 years in construction, guiding his hands. Kill the circuit at the breaker. Evelyn had to show him where the electrical panel was hidden behind a piece of art in the hallway. Remove the old fixture casing. Inspect the wiring. Strip the damaged section. Reconnect properly. Weatherproof the junction. Secure the new casing he kept in his emergency kit for exactly these situations. The whole time he was aware of Evelyn standing in the doorway behind him, watching, not hovering, not micromanaging, just present. She'd thrown a long coat over the robe and held a coffee mug in both hands, though he noticed she never actually drank from it. "You do this for a living?" she asked after a few minutes of silence. "Construction mostly, residential, some commercial, but yeah, electrical work is part of it." Caleb tightened the final screw, testing the connection. "I'm not an electrician, but I'm certified for basic residential stuff." "How long have you been doing it?" 15 years, give or take. Started as a laborer right out of high school. Worked my way up." He flipped the circuit back on, and the porch light blazed to life. Steady, bright, no flicker. "There we go. That should hold." "Thank you." Caleb climbed down from the small step ladder he'd brought, wiping his hands on a rag. "No problem. Just remember to check your exterior fixtures every few months, especially after storms. Prevents this kind of thing." He started packing his tools, expecting that to be the end of it. The job was done. The debt, if there had ever been one, was paid. He'd return home, take a hot shower, and forget about the woman in the glass house who looked like she was fighting a war nobody else could see. But then Evelyn said something that stopped him cold. "You're hungry." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact delivered with the same certainty she'd used when she said he wasn't security. And the strange thing was, she was right. He'd skipped dinner, planning to grab something after dropping off the box. That had been 3 hours ago. "I'm fine," he said automatically. "I have food. Too much food, actually. My assistant keeps sending meal deliveries, even though I keep telling her I don't need them." Evelyn paused, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. "Stay, eat. It's the least I can do after you fix that disaster waiting to happen." Every rational part of Caleb's brain screamed at him to decline politely and leave. He didn't know this woman. This wasn't his world. He had no business sitting down to dinner with a CEO in a house that probably cost more than he'd make in his entire lifetime. But there was something in the way she asked, something that felt less like obligation and more like she was testing whether human connection still worked the way it used to. Like she'd been alone in this glass fortress for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to just sit across from another person and share a meal. And Caleb Mercer, single father, construction worker, man who rebuilt his life from scratch after everything fell apart, knew exactly what that loneliness felt like. "Okay," he said, "but I should probably leave my boots by the door." The kitchen was as pristine as the rest of the house. All stainless steel appliances, marble countertops, and a wine fridge that probably cost more than Caleb's entire living room furniture set. Evelyn moved through it with surprising efficiency, pulling containers from the refrigerator, setting them on the counter, checking their contents with the quick assessment of someone who'd learned to make decisions fast and trust them. Rosemary chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread from that bakery on 5th, she narrated almost to herself. "My assistant has excellent taste and no concept of portion control for one person." "Smells incredible," Caleb said honestly. And it did. The kind of sophisticated home cooking he'd seen in magazines but never actually experienced. "Plates are in that cabinet. Silverware in the drawer below. Make yourself useful." It was an order, but delivered without edge. Caleb found himself smiling slightly as he set the table. There was something oddly comfortable about the dynamic. Two people who didn't know each other, working in the kind of synchronized silence that usually took years to develop. Within 15 minutes, the kitchen smelled like warmth and herbs and possibility. They sat across from each other at a dining table that could have seated 10. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. Just ate. And that silence wasn't awkward. It was steady. It was real. "You mentioned a daughter earlier," Evelyn said eventually, breaking bread with careful precision. "When you were explaining about the delivery delay." Caleb nodded, swallowing. "Maya, she's 7, smart as hell and stubborn as concrete. Gets that from you?" "Gets that from her mother, actually. I'm the pushover." He smiled, but there was weight behind it. "She's with her grandmother tonight. Sleepover, hence why I'm delivering packages at midnight instead of reading bedtime stories. Single father for 3 years now. Divorce finalized when Maya was 4. Caleb took a drink of water, washing down the words that always tasted bitter. Her mother, she wanted different things, a different life. One that didn't include waking up to a crying kid or living in a one-bedroom apartment while I finished my certifications. So she left, signed away custody without a fight. Haven't heard from her since. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened with recognition. The recognition of someone who understood what it meant to be left, to be chosen against. That must be difficult. Raising a child alone. Some days are harder than others. But Maya makes it worth it. She's the reason I get up in the morning. The reason I work doubles when I need to. The reason I fix porch lights at midnight instead of just ignoring strange boxes in my apartment. Because you're teaching her that things worth doing are worth doing, right? Caleb looked up, surprised. Yeah, exactly that. They ate in silence for a moment, and Caleb realized he was genuinely curious about this woman. Not about her money or her house or her obvious power, but about the person underneath, the one who looked so tired, the one whose phones wouldn't stop buzzing with calls she wouldn't answer. Can I ask what you do? He said. I mean, I could probably Google it, but you haven't. Seemed rude. And honestly, I don't usually care much about what people do for work. I care more about whether they're decent humans. Evelyn set down her fork with careful deliberation. I run a tech company, Hard Analytics. We specialize in data security and corporate risk management. Started it 12 years ago in my apartment with a laptop and a business loan I probably shouldn't have been approved for. Now we employ 400 people and contract with half the Fortune 500. So, you're kind of a big deal. I'm kind of a target. The words came out harder than she probably intended. Evelyn took a breath, visibly pulling back. Sorry, that was true, Caleb offered gently. She met his eyes, and in that moment, the mask fell completely. What he saw underneath was frightening in its rawness. Anger, fear, exhaustion, determination burning so hot it could melt steel. There are people who want what I've built, Evelyn said quietly. People who think they can take it because I'm a woman, because I started from nothing, because I don't play their games or bow to their threats. They're circling closer every day. And she stopped herself, jaw tightening. I'm fighting a war most people don't even know is happening. Caleb didn't offer platitudes. Didn't tell her it would be okay or that she was strong enough to handle it. People like Evelyn Hart didn't need cheerleaders. They needed someone to witness the truth without flinching. How bad? He asked simply. Bad enough that I've hired private security for my office. Bad enough that I don't sleep more than 3 hours a night. Bad enough that every phone call could be the one telling me they've won. She picked up her wine glass. When had she poured wine and took a long drink? A board member named Grant Mitchell is leading the charge. He wants me out. Wants to install himself or one of his puppets as CEO. Strip the company for parts. Sell it off piece by piece to his friends. He's been building a case for months, gathering votes, making promises, threatening anyone who might support me. That's legal. Corporate warfare rarely cares about legality, just plausible deniability. Evelyn's smile was sharp enough to cut, but I've been building my own case. Evidence, documentation, things that would end him if they came to light. The question is whether I can deploy them before he deploys his. Caleb leaned back in his chair, processing. This was so far outside his world of lumber and drywall and electrical codes that it might as well have been happening on another planet. But the fundamental truth underneath was familiar. Someone powerful trying to take what someone else had built. Someone fighting to protect what mattered. Why not go to the authorities, the SEC, or whoever handles corporate crime? Because by the time they investigate, the damage is done. Companies like mine live and die on reputation and investor confidence. If Grant manages to create enough doubt, enough scandal, the truth won't matter. The board will force me out to stabilize things. And by the time I'm exonerated, if I ever am, Hard Analytics will belong to someone else. That's ruthless. Welcome to high-stakes business. Evelyn refilled her wine glass, then seemed to realize what she was doing and set the bottle down firmly. I'm sorry. You came here to return a box, not listen to my corporate nightmares. I stayed for dinner, Caleb pointed out, which means I'm choosing to be here. And for what it's worth, your nightmare sounds like it needs more people on your side. Something in her expression softened. I have lawyers, security consultants, a PR firm on retainer. What I don't have is, she trailed off, searching for words. Someone who isn't getting paid to care. Someone who isn't part of the machine. Evelyn looked at him with something close to wonder. You have no idea who I am, what I'm worth, what connections I have. You're not impressed by any of this. She gestured at the house, the expensive everything surrounding them. Are you? Caleb considered lying. Considered saying the right thing, the polite thing. Instead, he told the truth. I'm impressed you built something from nothing. I'm impressed you're fighting to keep it. But the house, the stuff? No, that's just money. Money doesn't tell me who you are. He met her eyes steadily. The fact that you let a stranger fix your porch light because it needed fixing. The fact that you're feeding me instead of sending me away. The fact that you're exhausted but still standing, that impresses me. The silence that followed was different from before. It was charged, weighted, full of something neither of them had words for yet. Evelyn opened her mouth to respond. And that's when the headlights swept across the windows. Both of them froze. The warm kitchen atmosphere evaporated instantly, replaced by something cold and sharp. Through the front windows, Caleb could see a car pulling into the driveway. Expensive, dark, moving with the kind of confidence that didn't ask permission. Evelyn's entire posture changed. Not fear. He saw no fear in her. But every muscle tensed, every soft edge hardened. This was the CEO. This was the warrior. This was the woman who'd built an empire and would burn the world down before she let someone steal it. You should go, she said, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Now out the back. Who is it? Someone who shouldn't be here. Someone who the front door opened. Didn't knock, didn't ring the bell, just opened like whoever was on the other side had a key or didn't care about locks or boundaries or basic human decency. A man stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and entitlement. He was tall, mid-50s, wearing a tailored jacket that probably cost more than Caleb's monthly rent. His hair was silver at the temples in that way that looked calculated rather than natural, and his eyes, sharp, cold assessing, swept the room until they landed on the kitchen, on Evelyn, on Caleb. His expression flickered through surprise, calculation, and settled on amusement, the kind of amusement predators show when they've cornered something unexpected. Evelyn, he said smoothly, like he hadn't just broken into her home. Working late. Evelyn's voice when she spoke could have frozen nitrogen. You're not supposed to be here, Grant. Grant Mitchell, because of course this was Grant Mitchell, the man trying to steal her company, smiled with absolutely no warmth. I still have a key from when I was on the House Security Committee. You remember when we were installing the updated system last year? That access was supposed to be revoked. Apparently, there was an oversight. He walked further into the house like he owned it, his gaze sliding back to Caleb with naked assessment. And who is this? Caleb stood up slowly, not aggressive, but not backing down either. He dealt with men like this before, not in boardrooms, but on job sites where foremen thought their position meant they could push around the guys actually doing the work. Men who measured worth in dollars and power instead of character and competence. Just someone fixing a light, Caleb said evenly. Grant's smile sharpened. At this hour, how convenient. He looked back at Evelyn. Really, Evelyn, I thought you'd have better judgment, letting strangers into your home in your current situation. The implication hung in the air like poison. Like Caleb was a threat, like his presence here was somehow scandalous or inappropriate, like Evelyn was doing something wrong by existing in her own home. Mr. Mitchell, Evelyn said, and her voice had dropped to that deadly calm that probably made lawyers nervous. You need to leave. Whatever you think you're accomplishing by showing up uninvited, I'm accomplishing exactly what I intended. Grant pulled out his phone, tapped something, and Caleb saw the screen light up with a photo. A photo of this house, this kitchen taken from outside through the windows. Recent enough that Caleb and Evelyn were visible at the table. Just wanted to ensure our CEO is maintaining appropriate professional standards. You understand? Shareholders get concerned when leadership makes questionable personal choices. The threat was clear, crystal clear. He was building a narrative, creating evidence of impropriety that didn't exist, manufacturing scandal from innocence. Caleb felt anger rise in his chest, the kind of anger that came from watching someone twist truth into weapons. But before he could speak, Evelyn stepped forward, putting herself between Grant and Caleb in a move so subtle it almost looked accidental. Get out of my house, she said quietly. Now or what? You'll call security. Grant's laugh was silk over razors. Please do. I'd love to explain to them why you're entertaining strange men while corporate matters are pending. I'm sure the board would find that very interesting during our emergency meeting next week. He turned to go, then paused at the door, looking back at Caleb with eyes that calculated exactly how much damage this moment could cause. People like you shouldn't get involved in things you don't understand, Grant said pleasantly. Tends to end badly. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with ominous finality. For a long moment, neither Evelyn nor Caleb moved. The house felt different now, violated, unsafe, like a sanctuary that had been breached and would never feel secure again. Finally, Evelyn let out a breath she'd been holding and pressed her palms against the counter, head bowed. I'm sorry you saw that. I'm sorry he don't apologize for him being, and she looked up, surprised. Caleb crossed his arms. That's what he is, right? And with power, who's trying to intimidate you, who just broke into your house and took photos to use against you. He shook his head. You don't need to apologize for that. He'll use this, the photo, the narrative. Evelyn's hands were shaking slightly, the first crack in her armor Caleb had seen. He'll tell the board I'm unstable, making poor decisions, fraternizing inappropriately. It doesn't matter that it's not true. It just has to sound true enough. Then tell them the truth. A guy returned your mail and fixed a safety hazard. That's it. The truth doesn't matter in my world. Perception matters. And Grant is very good at controlling perception. She met his eyes, and Caleb saw genuine fear there for the first time. Not fear of Grant. Fear of losing everything she'd built. They're coming for my company. And they don't fight clean. Caleb thought about Maya. About the custody battle where his ex-wife's lawyers had twisted every moment of his life into evidence of inadequacy. How they tried to make his work hours into neglect, his one-bedroom apartment into poverty, his fierce love for his daughter into obsession. How he'd won anyway, not because he had better lawyers, but because he refused to let lies become truth. What do you need? He asked simply. Evelyn blinked. What? Right now, tonight. What do you need? The question seemed to break something in her. She laughed, but it was the laugh of someone who'd forgotten what genuine offers of help felt like. I need Grant Mitchell to disappear. I need the board to remember why they hired me. I need proof that stands up in court, and the time to deploy it before he deploys his. She ran a hand through her damp hair. I need things you can't give me. Maybe, but what do you need tonight? The distinction seemed to reach her. She looked around the kitchen at the half-eaten dinner, the wine bottle, the mess that proved humans actually lived here instead of just existing in beautiful efficiency. Honestly, I need to not be alone in this house while Grant has a key and uses it whenever he wants. I need to feel like someone gives a damn whether I disappear tomorrow. Her voice cracked slightly. I need to remember what it feels like when someone helps without wanting something in return. Caleb checked his watch. Almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Maya wouldn't be home until 8. He had time. I can change your locks, he said. Front door, back door, whatever other entrances you have. I've got the tools and the hardware in my truck. Keep spare deadbolts for emergency jobs. Take me 90 minutes to do it right. And when I'm done, Grant Mitchell won't have access to your house anymore. Evelyn stared at him. You would do that at 1 o'clock in the morning. You fed me excellent chicken. Seems like a fair trade. He smiled slightly. Plus, I really don't like people who break into houses and take creepy photos. Call it a personality flaw. For the first time since Grant had arrived, something in Evelyn's expression lightened. Not quite hope. She was too practical for hope, but something close. The recognition that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. Okay, she said. Change my locks. They worked through the night, Caleb drilling out old lock cylinders, installing new deadbolts, replacing strike plates, while Evelyn followed with a notepad documenting everything for her security company. They didn't talk much beyond the practical necessities of the work, but the silence between them had shifted into something almost comfortable. Two people working toward a common goal. Two people choosing to trust each other in small, incremental ways. By the time Caleb finished the last lock, installed the final security chain, and tested every entrance twice, the sky was starting to lighten toward dawn. His hands ached, his shoulders were tight, and he'd need approximately a gallon of coffee to function later. But every door in Evelyn Hart's house was now secured with brand new locks that only she had keys to. He found her in the kitchen making coffee with the kind of precision she probably brought to everything. 2 cups already poured. All done, Caleb reported. Front door, back door, side entrance, garage access, new deadbolts, new keys, old locks completely removed, so there's no chance of duplicate keys working. You're secure. Evelyn handed him a cup of coffee. Thank you. I mean that. You didn't have to. I know. That's why I did it. She smiled. A real smile this time, not the careful mask she wore for the world. You're either the kindest person I've met in years or the most naive. But can I be both? In my experience, kindness and naivety are usually the same thing. Then your experience has been with the wrong people. Evelyn studied him over the rim of her coffee cup, and Caleb had the distinct sensation of being evaluated by someone who made million-dollar decisions before breakfast. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really stay tonight? And don't say it was the chicken. Caleb considered the question seriously. Thought about Maya, about rebuilding a life from scratch, about knowing what it felt like when the world decided you weren't worth fighting for. Because you needed help and I could give it, he said finally. Because I've been in situations where I felt alone and under attack, and I remembered how much it mattered when someone showed up anyway. Because Grant Mitchell pissed me off, and I'm petty enough to enjoy ruining his day. He paused. And because you seem like someone worth knowing, the real you, not the CEO version. Evelyn sat down her coffee cup very carefully. You realize this is going to get messy, right? Grant won't stop. The board meeting is in 6 days. Whatever evidence I have, I need to deploy it perfectly or I lose everything and anyone associated with me becomes collateral damage. I fix houses for a living. I'm pretty good with messy. This isn't drywall, Caleb. This is corporate warfare. Reputations destroyed, lives ruined, lawyers and money and power you can't imagine. If Grant decides you're a threat or an asset or just useful leverage, then I'll deal with it. Caleb met her eyes steadily. I'm not asking to fight your war for you. I'm not trying to be some hero who rides in and saves the day. But I can change locks, fix lights, show up when you need someone to show up. Sometimes that's enough. The silence that followed was weighted with all the things neither of them were saying about connection and timing and the strange alchemy that happens when two people meet at exactly the moment they need each other most. Finally, Evelyn nodded once. Okay. You can show up, but on one condition. What's that? Don't treat me like I'm fragile. Don't try to protect me from my own battles. Don't decide what I can or can't handle. Her voice was firm, clear, absolutely certain. I've spent 12 years fighting for respect in rooms full of men who thought I needed protecting. What I actually need is someone who trusts me to fight my own fights while being there if I fall. Caleb smiled. I can do that. Good. Evelyn glanced at the window where dawn was painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. You should go get some sleep. Your daughter will be home soon. Yeah. He sat down his empty cup, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. Call me if you need anything else fixed, or if Grant shows up again, or just he pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card that had seen better days. Just call for whatever. Evelyn took the card, studying it like it was evidence in a trial. Caleb Mercer, Morrison Construction. You have terrible handwriting. Years of writing on lumber with grease pencils ruins your penmanship. She walked him to the door, the one he just secured with a brand new deadbolt, watched as he gathered his tools as he stepped out into the morning air that smelled like rain and possibility. Caleb, he turned back. Thank you, Evelyn said quietly. Not just for the locks, for she seemed to search for the right words. For seeing me, the actual me. It's been a while since anyone bothered. Then they're idiots. The actual you is the impressive part. He left her standing in the doorway of her glass fortress, holding a business card and a new set of keys, looking like someone who just remembered what it felt like to trust another human being. Caleb drove home as the sun rose over Harwick, painting the wet streets in liquid gold. He was exhausted, behind on sleep, and had somehow gotten himself tangled in the life of a CEO, fighting a war he barely understood. But as he pulled into his apartment complex, as he climbed the stairs to Unit 412, as he stood in his quiet living room that still held Maya's toys and artwork and all the beautiful chaos of their life together, he realized something fundamental had shifted. He'd walked into that glass house expecting to drop off a box and leave. Instead, he'd found someone who needed the same thing he'd needed 3 years ago when his world fell apart. Someone who showed up anyway. And Caleb Mercer knew better than most that sometimes showing up was everything. Caleb managed 3 hours of sleep before Maya came bounding through the door at 8:15, her grandmother trailing behind with the exhausted but satisfied expression of someone who'd survived a sleepover with a 7-year-old. Dad, we made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs and watched 2 movies, and Grandma let me stay up until 10 o'clock. Maya launched herself at him. All wild curls and unstoppable energy. Caleb caught her mid-flight, spinning her around despite the fact that every muscle in his body was screaming for rest. Dinosaur pancakes? That's pretty epic. They were huge, like this big. Ma spread her arms as wide as they could go, which in her estimation probably meant the size of actual prehistoric creatures. That's amazing, sweetheart. He set her down, looking up at his mother. Thanks, Mom. I hope she wasn't too much trouble. She's never trouble. His mother, Susan Mercer, a woman who'd raised 3 boys and still had energy to spare, gave him a long assessing look. You look exhausted. Late night. Had to drop something off. Took longer than expected. Clears throat. Susan's tone suggested she didn't quite believe that was the whole story, but she was kind enough not to press. Well, I'll leave you two to your morning. Maya, remember what we talked about. Clean up my toys before bedtime and be nice to Dad. Even when he makes me eat vegetables, Mia recited dutifully. Good girl. Susan kissed her granddaughter's head, squeezed Caleb's shoulder in that way mothers do when they're worried, but trying not to show it, and left them to their Sunday. The rest of the day unfolded in the comfortable chaos that Caleb had built his life around. Making actual pancakes, normal-sized, no dinosaurs, helping Maya with a school project about butterflies, fixing the wobbly leg on her desk chair, playing 3 rounds of her current favorite board game, making spaghetti for dinner. Normal, simple. But his mind kept drifting back to that glass house on Riverside Drive, to Evelyn Hart standing in her kitchen at dawn, holding new keys like they were some kind of lifeline, to the look in her eyes when she'd said, "Thank you for seeing her." He told himself it was just residual adrenaline from the encounter with Grant Mitchell. Just the normal human